So welcome everyone to the Legal Service Trust Fund Commission meeting today. We're going to start a little bit a technical script that we have. Kim, do you want to take it away?
That's me today. Okay. And I apologize for sounding a little raspy. Welcome commission members, liaisons, and member of the public to today's Legal Services Trust Fund Commission meeting. Thank you for joining us. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raised hand feature. Please utilize this feature to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. A friendly reminder that this is a video conference, and please be aware of your surroundings behind you. All commission and committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar website. Finally, Zoom captioning is also available. To enable this captioning, select Live Transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen, then select Enable Auto Transcription. Thank you.
Great. Are we still waiting for some people to join?
We have quorum right now.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Well, briefly before we do public comment, I did want to just acknowledge that we have some new commissioners that are joining us for this first somewhat ad hoc meeting. And so I'll briefly give their names, but we'll do more formal introductions at our next meeting, okay? But I did just want to make sure we welcomed Jacqueline, Alowina, Millen, and Jonathan. Thank you all. We're very excited that you've joined the commission and that you can make it to this one today. So before we get into our agenda item, I did want to make sure, see if there's any public comment. And just as a preliminary matter for public comment, we're going to keep it to 3 minutes or less, just because this is somewhat, that should be sufficient. If people need more time, they can let us know. Is there anyone here for public comment?
I don't see any members of the public in the attendee pool.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I will turn it over. Should we take attendance?
I can do roll call.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Roll call.
And I just want to apologize again. I'm sorry, I think the meeting link that I sent out for the meeting reminder was wrong today. So if you ever have any trouble getting the meeting link, it's usually embedded in the Outlook calendar invite. I sent out a meeting reminder, but if all goes wrong, then you can access our agenda on the State Bar website. So those are the 3 places where you can find the meeting link. Again, I just want to welcome our 4 new members. We're just so pleased to have you. And at the next commission meeting in November, we'll all get to know each other a little bit more. But I think today, everybody would appreciate kind of if we try to move things along, have a shorter meeting since it's an add-on meeting. With that, I will do roll call. Connolly?
Present.
Al-Saraf?
Present.
Ali Khani?
Present.
Ball?
Here.
Fightmaster?
Here.
Blakemore?
Here.
Campbell?
Here.
Escobedo? Galkin?
Here.
Gonzalez?
Here.
Gonzalez?
Here. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you. Iskin? Iskin? I thought I saw error, but no.
Sorry, I was on mute. Here.
Okay, thank you. King?
Here.
Judge Klein?
Here.
Cruz? Lee? Mahoney?
Here.
Milrod?
Here.
Morales? Morales?
Here.
Thank you. Sandville?
Here.
Sunderson? Sundersian? Milian, I thought I saw your.
I did. I promoted her. I'm not sure.
What?
Here?
Oh, there she is. Okay. Thank you.
Here. Sorry, major tech issues. I'm so sorry.
No problem. No problem. Vargas?
Here.
Okay. Justice Rodriguez? Judge Seligman?
Here.
Judge Yang?
Present.
We have quorum. I'll do our liaisons. Selena and Zach from LAC.
Present.
I think we're both here. Thanks,
Okay,
John.
great. And Melanie and Laura from the Judicial Council.
Hi,
Okay.
Laura's here.
Great.
Hi.
Okay, Erica, I'll turn it over to you for one agenda item.
Great. And yes, thank you all for making time for this ad hoc meeting so that we can take care of these care court grants. So I think turning it over to Chris and Rocio to discuss for us what we're considering today on our first agenda item, first and only.
Yeah. Thank you, Erica. I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, and thank you from me as well for accommodating a ad hoc meeting. The need for this meeting was brought about by a relatively recent change in the law that became effective in mid-September. So the one agenda item, I should say to Rocio, Eric, who's the chair of the Care Court Grants Committee, is there anything you wanted to say at the very start, or is it okay for me to dive in?
Just dive in, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, please.
Great. So without further ado, the one action item for today is to approve recommendations from the Care Court Grants Committee for 2023 Care Court Grants. This is essentially approved recommendations part 2 because the full commission has already approved some recommendations for 23 Care Court grants, and it did so at its August 10th meeting. And I'll describe very briefly the statutory need to do this part 2. So I have a couple of slides with some statutory background that might be especially helpful for the newest commissioners, but that'll just take me a couple of minutes. I'll refresh your memories of the committee's scoring rubric that it used to make this grant recommendation to the full commission. I'll present the award recommendation, a slide to just describe what happens with the remaining funds pursuant to the Budget Act of 2023, and a proposed resolution. So as a refresher and for the news commissioners, there is a new court program in California. It is called the Care Court Program. It stands for Community Assistance, Recovery, and Empowerment Care Court Program. It is created by the CARE Act. That is an act that Governor Newsom signed into law last September of 2022. And the court program is now launching this year in 8 counties. It is a program where adults with those who are 18 or over, who have severe mental health issues, can become what are called care court respondents to access behavioral health care, stabilization medication, housing, and other community services and supports. The program will actually launch on October 1st of this year in Glen, Orange, Riverside, San Diego, San Francisco, Stanislaus, and Tuolumne counties. It will launch on December 1st of this year in LA County. It will launch in the rest of California by December 1st of 2024. Care courts, pursuant to the CARE Act, have to appoint qualified legal services projects, which for the newer commissioners are the nonprofits that qualify for IOLTA and Equal Access Fund grants through this commission. Those are statutory entities to represent those who are the subject of care court petitions or respondents. And it further directs the commission to fund QLSPs to represent those respondents in CARE Act proceedings and matters related to care agreements and plans. Care agreements are essentially they look like settlement agreements for respondents between the respondent and the county behavioral health agency where the case is being heard. Care plans would be court-ordered community services and supports. The commission, pursuant to the CARE Act, may also fund pursuant to the CARE Act and now also the Budget Act of 2023 as amended, may fund support centers and, quote, other entities to provide legal training, support, and coordination to implement the act. The CARE Act provides that if no QLSP has agreed to represent respondents, care courts will appoint a public defender to do so. So the Budget Act of 2023 as amended last month provides at least $20,400,000 for QLSPs, qualified legal services projects, and public defenders to represent respondents. And this is the operative piece for today's meeting, up to $1,020,000 for support centers or other entities to provide legal training and technical assistance to implement the act. I kept here just for the record that it also provides $1,432,000 for the state bar to administer these funds with the commission, including collect outcomes and expenditures data from public defenders, qualified legal services projects, support centers, and other entities as appropriate. So the change that brought about the need for this ad hoc meeting was Senate Bill 104. It amended the Budget Act of 2023. The Budget Act of 2023 originally passed earlier in the summer, but SB 104 passed on September 13th. And among other amendments to the Budget Act, it authorizes care court grants from this commission to support centers, and then it added or other entities that have expertise in providing legal training and technical assistance to legal aid providers or public defenders. Previously, this funding for legal training and technical assistance was limited, eligibility was limited to support centers. So it's an expansion in eligibility. As the commissioners who attended the August 10th commission meeting may recall, no support centers applied for this funding back when the Care Court Grants Committee released a request for proposals for QLSPs and support centers and stood up an application. There were no support center applicants for an award this year. There were QLSP applicants. So since SB 104 passed, one agency has applied under the expanded eligibility provision as an, quote, other entity. So I'm going to use the phrase other entity several times, and that's because that's how it's worded in SB 104. The need for this meeting to be as soon as possible is this court program did launch, as I mentioned, on October 1st, so we kind of need to get everything going as soon as possible. So the committee approved the request for proposals that was used for this other entity applicant in the interest of expediency. The original request for proposals for QLSPs and support centers was approved back on June 27th. A successful proposal pursuant to that RFP would describe the applicants, whether it's a QLSPs, a support centers, or now an other entity applicants, their ability, that is their qualifications, as well as their capacity to do this work and manage this grant, to perform their role under the CARE Act. So for QLSPs, that's to represent respondents. For support centers and other entities, that's to support QLSPs and public defenders in representing respondents. The relevant substantive experience for everyone is, among other things, experience, knowledge of, and the ability to essentially provide or support QLSPs and PDs in providing adults who are experiencing a severe mental illness as defined in the CARE Act with these community services, with the services the CARE Act contemplates. Experience representing clients in mental health cases such as LPS conservatorships or assisted outpatient treatment matters, helping clients to access the types of services and supports that the CARE Act seeks to provide. And litigating and negotiating generally, which are the interventions the CARE Act contemplates for respondents' counsel. This is not a comprehensive list, but it's the big things that the RFP sort of focused on. The Care Court Grants Committee, exercising the authority delegated to it by the full commission, embedded a rubric in the RFP. That rubric was again applied for this other entity applicant in the interest of expediency. So I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but I will just touch on sort of the broad categories in the rubric. The rubric had 4 areas where an applicant would receive a score of exceeds, meets, or below expectations, or perhaps not addressed. Those categories were the overall impact and sort of efficacy of their project strategies, their qualifications to do the work that they proposed, their administration, their ability to the organizational capacity to essentially provide these services and manage this grant. And then they could receive a score for their proposed approach to evaluating the efficacy of their services. This rubric was applied for this one other entity applicant. Okay. So I already touched on this, SB 104 expand the eligibility. The commission had authorized back in March, actually, the Care Court Grants Committee to release the RFP, create the scoring rubric, and it also authorized a commissioner staff team to score applications in consultation with the committee. So that's what happened for the awards recommendations that were presented for the August meeting, and that happened again here. In both cases, both back in the summer and now, the scoring team consisted of 2 committee members and 2 State Bar staff members, following the same process where they arrived at a rounded average score for each row of the rubric, each of those 4 rows. And the scoring team set for itself a minimum score, a floor, to recommend funding to the committee. And that was a score of 56 points out of 80, which is 70% of the points available. There was no change in that process. The scoring team and the committee, by extension, looked at some things in particular in its conversation. So the scoring team took to heart that CareCourt is going to be a brand new program that will be working with a particularly vulnerable population, adults experiencing a severe enumerated mental illness. Many, if not most of them, are going to be homeless or at risk of homelessness. And so the scoring team focused on whether this proposal by another entity applicant demonstrated an ability, an intention and an ability to support QLSPs and public defenders in serving this population. For example, the scoring team looked at the applicant's readiness to prepare QLSPs and public defenders to serve people who have severe mental health issues, to support them in implementing care plans and agreements, as well as advocating for respondents in court, kind of like following through and making sure that the care plans and implement that there's this follow through and compliance by all the parties involved. Its readiness to evaluate its services, to assess its own efficacy and pivot project strategies as necessary, and then of course to provide the substantive expertise that's required. The one proposal that's being recommended for an award scored 62 points. This proposal is from a state agency that has applied as an other entity candidate applicant. The name of the agency, or rather the unit within the agency, is the Indigent Defense Improvement Division of the Office of the State Public Defender. Since the floor for the scoring team to recommend an award to the committee was 56 points, it did recommend this proposal for an award, and the committee today recommends it for an award to the full commission. The scoring team and the committee recommend it at the full amount that the applicant has sought, which is $254,850. As a reminder, the pot that was available for support centers and other entities was $1,020,000. I'll pause. There's only like maybe 2 slides left before the proposed resolution. So I'm just gonna, the next slide is kind of an FYI, but what happens to the remaining funds. So I'm gonna pause and take questions. Hi, Selena.
Mine, of course, is not a question, but a comment. I know that many commissioners might not be aware of this agency, but LAC was connected with them because of the upcoming NLADA conference here in the Bay Area. And so Zach and I had a call with them recently, and I feel like we will have a stronger and better connections between the Office of the State Public Defender and legal aid. So if some of the scoring concerns was a lack of knowledge of our side of CareCourts, we're already working on building those relationships now.
Thank you, Selena. And I was remiss not to mention at the beginning that for the newer commissioners, you'll likely see this with most grant making processes for these more competitive and discretionary grants. We posted with today's materials a profile sheet of this application that extracts a lot of the most substantive and relevant information, especially if it was relevant to their score. So there's a really nice summary in the posted materials about what exactly they're proposing to use these funds for. Jacqueline, and you're on mute. There you go.
Yes, I was just wondering, is there, do you think there's any particular reason that so few people applied? Is this normal? Is it just because people don't know about this program? Or what do you think is the reason? And where does that money go? Does the money now go back to a big pot someplace, or is it still available for applicants to apply throughout the year?
2 great questions. So the answer to the first question is we did actually ask a few support centers who qualified to apply, who we thought might be interested. It might be a good mission fit. what their thinking was. And we know, understandably, we kind of got a variety of responses because each org sort of had a different reason for, on the support center side, for skipping this, the opportunity to apply this year. But some of the reasons we heard were, it's a brand new court program. It's hard for them to know what it's going to look like on a day-to-day basis. They kind of want to wait to see if it's a good mission fit for their particular services priorities. Like once it's up and running, and they might be interested in applying next year. This is on the support center side. Some of them anticipate challenges given the state of the job market right now. I think hiring is very competitive. They were a little worried about their ability to hire up and spend down this grant by next June 30th, which of course is not something that will necessarily be true year to year.
And I'll just add, hello, Rocio Avalos, Program Director. We also worked with about a dozen of the QLSPs and support centers who received care court planning grants this year in helping to build out and think through this new court program. And so we have, as Chris mentioned, been in touch and have a pretty good sense of why they did or did not end up applying for these funds. And we're going to continue these conversations so that they have the most up-to-date information as they consider whether to apply for next year.
Okay, sounds good, because it's such an important issue. You would think that there would be so many people applying, considering the homeless issue that we have.
And the answer to your second question is what happens with the leftover funds. So for the $1,020,000, that's the Budget Act of 2023 allocated for support centers and after SB 104, also other entities to provide legal training and technical assistance. It provides that any remaining funds go to representation of respondents. So that's the work that the QLSPs and public defenders are performing. So the next slide actually shows how that will go to each county for representation of respondents. Since the QLSPs' awards, we might approach this differently next year, but for this year, since because of timing, because the QLSPs' awards are already set, it's essentially going to the public defenders' offices, which also, pursuant to the Budget Act of 2023, get what is whatever is left over from the QLSP awards. So essentially, at the end of the day, it's going into the pot for counties to provide representation to respondents in care court, according to a formula. Yeah. Okay. That's a really good segue. So reallocating the remaining funds. So the qualified legal services projects and the public defenders that, again, the QLSPs needed to submit a competitive application to be able to serve as respondents counsel. They had to apply to serve respondents in particular counties. The Legal Services Trust Fund Commission at the August 10th meeting approved 2 QLSPs to serve as respondents counsel. Both are for San Francisco. And then pursuant to the Budget Act 23, the remaining funds go to the public defenders' offices. The Budget Act also provided that the commission, through the committee, use a formula to determine how much funding is available in each county. And that was to ensure that there was sort of like an equitable distribution in each county. The formula, just as a refresher, looked first and foremost at each county's share of the 8 county cohorts general population. So mostly tied to general population, kind of like relative to one another, the general population. It also set a funding floor of $60,000 for each county. So if anyone's looking at general population, we get less than that. They were raised up to that funding floor. And then finally, it applied what we call like a cost of counsel factor. Essentially, the awards were allocations rather, were adjusted upwards and downwards depending on the relative cost of providing this representation in each county using public defender pay data. But under no circumstances lowering someone's county's allocation beneath the funding floor. So That was a little bit technical, but that's just to say we use the same formula to reallocate the remaining $765,150 that's left over from that $1,020,000. And that's if the commission today approves an award to, I'm going to use their acronym, OSPD, who's applied, of their full amount that they asked for, which is what the committee is recommending. $765,150 will remain. It'll go up by formula. The one thing I kind of want to point out in this table, so you'll see that essentially the funding for representation of respondents went from an initial 20,400,000, and then I highlighted this in yellow, up to 21,165,150. So that's the 20,400,000 plus the 765,150 that's left over. The other thing I'd point out about this table is 2 counties actually will not be getting additional funds. Those are Glenn, it's the first row county, and Tuolumne County at the bottom, the last row. They were going to receive less than $60,000 originally. So they were raised up to the funding floor. And even after reallocating the remaining $765,150, they would still be under the funding floor. So they would still just be raised up to 60,000. So even after this reallocation, they're still getting more than they would otherwise get, but for the funding floor. So their amount's staying the same. The other 6 counties, though, are getting a share of the 765,150. This is kind of an FYI table. This isn't actually, these numbers are not going to be part of the resolution. This is just so you know what happens to the leftover funds. Okay. So the next slide is the proposed resolution. Where I'll go ahead and put it up on the screen. But if there were any more questions, this would be the time to ask. Or if there's any member of the Care Court Grants Committee that wanted to say anything at this time, this would be your opportunity.
And I'll just say that the committee who reviewed this application thought that the public defenders group, seemed qualified, and it seemed like a good program, a good use of the funds. So we support the resolution.
Thanks, Eric. Jason, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, just a funding floor question really quick. Is that funding floor established by internal policy or is that statute? And then following on from that, was there any consideration given to adjusting the funding floor in the interim, given the funds that we're allocating kind of by formula?
The funding floor, great question, is not enumerated in the Budget Act. So the Commission and the Care Court Grants Committee had discretion to pick the funding floor. The what I'll flag is, to the best of my memory, how we arrived at 60,000 is we ran a lot of iterations and consulted county level stakeholders in the spring, like the mayor's office of particular counties. We ran iterations with a funding floor of 125,000. We ran it as low as 50,000, and after numerous meetings, 60,000 ended up being a sweet spot among probably multiple sweet spots. What was this? And then you had a second part to your question, I think.
I guess it was whether we considered, even though they're still under the funding floor, whether there was consideration to, adjusting the funding floor upward in light of everyone else getting, some chunk of the surplus monies that isn't going out.
We did not look at that just because we approached it with the goal of being consistent with instead of changing the formula midstream.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Any other questions?
If you're looking for a motion, I will move that we approve the resolution.
Catherine seconds.
Great. All right, why don't we take a vote?
Roll call. Alakani,
Yes, approve.
Ball,
Yes.
Whitemaster,
Yes.
Blakemore,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Escobedo, Calkin,
Yes.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Fiskin,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Judge Klein, Cruz, Lee, Mahoney,
Yes.
Milrod,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Stanville,
Yes.
Sunderson,
Yes.
Vargas,
Yes.
Al-Saraf,
Yes.
Connolly,
Yes.
motion passes.
Great. I think that's all that's on our agenda for today. Thank you very much to the whole commission for again coming to meet for this ad hoc meeting. And thank you to the Care Court committee for working on this and to staff for kind of putting all of this together. Catherine, you have your hand raised.
I just wanted to congratulate both you, Erica and Amin, for being
Oh.
the chair and vice chair for this year. I think it's really terrific, and I'm sure we all look forward to working with you, but I do in particular both of you. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I look forward to working with everyone, and obviously any issues come up, I have a pretty open door policy. So yes, thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you,
Yes.
Catherine.
Yeah, and yes, I'm looking forward to working with Amin. He's a good steady hand. Yes.
I apologize I'm not on video, but I'm looking forward to it, and I appreciate, the efforts and the dedication that Erica and the rest of the commission has shown. So I'm excited for this year.
Yeah, it should be a good one. So yes, we started off with a bang. We've got our first motion out, and only a little bit late compared to the legislature's timeline. Good job, us. Thank you again to the Care Courts Grants Committee, and look forward to seeing all the work coming out of all the rest of the committees. We have, hopefully a very exciting year ahead of us. And yep, I will see you all in November, I think is our next meeting. Dawn's shaking her head. And until then, enjoy some time off, and then we'll come back with a very full agenda and lots of interesting things to get into. So have a great Friday. Have a good Halloween.
Yep.
We'll see you all after.